Okay. Hey guys, welcome to episode number 3. We're going to be talking about some of the new changes for first-time buyers. We're going to be talking a little bit about where interest rates might be going, and we are going to start off with Tim. Where are you right now? Because it looks like you're on the top of a mountain.
Yeah, I am on the top of a mountain. This is overlooking the coastal mountain range near Vancouver. So for those of you that don't know, we're in the lower mainland, and I make my home on the top of a mountain here. So
Okay,
coming to you
great,
live.
great. Well, you can ski down. We'll have lunch together
Yeah, not this
this
year.
week.
Maybe a
Okay.
mountain bike or tumble.
Tim, I wanted to ask you, look, it's been several weeks now, but Vancouver was announced as one of only 2 Canadian cities to be hosting World Cup matches. Now, as a big soccer fan like myself, I know that this is a massive event. It is the best advertising platform on planet Earth. It even exceeds the Olympics. More people watch the World Cup than watch the Olympics. Vancouver here gets more matches than Toronto. We get 7 matches, 2 in the knockout round. And Canada actually has a good team for the first time that I can remember in my lifetime. So, having said that, are you a soccer fan? Will you be in the stadium with some face paint there?
So no, certainly not a soccer fan. I have nothing against the sport, but I'm not a fan. I don't follow it. I was aware that we are getting the World Cup, that it's coming here. I think, every 4 years I watch a portion of the World Cup final, and that's about the extent of the soccer or football that I watch. I watch more American style football and NFL, but soccer not so much. But I mean, hey, it's cool. It's cool. It's going to be here. I hope lots of people from other countries and other places come here and spend lots of money in our city. That's what I hope happens.
Great, great.
And
Well,
and what?
okay.
Wait a
It's
sec though. So you tell me, sorry, but so we have a good team. I'm actually curious. We have a good team this year. I remember, was it the last one or the Olympics or something, and we made it for the first time and then just got killed. It felt like. Is there a chance? I was it the last one we didn't score a goal?
We did score a goal. Canada scored its first ever goal in a
Right,
World
right.
Cup.
Yeah.
That's
So is the
right.
bar higher this year, or are we still just trying to score a goal?
Well, I think the goal would even, at least be to score 2 goals at
Okay.
our home World Cup. So no, I think the bar is still pretty high. I mean, I think you'd expect them to win one of the 3 matches.
Right.
So I
Okay.
think that's the thinking. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
Well, no, it'll be
uh,
exciting.
yeah. It'll be exciting. And look, it's my contention that the Olympics put this city of Vancouver on the map. It was just a small, sleepy West Coast city, maybe a jewel on the West Coast prior to us having the Olympics. And once we had the Olympics, things changed. It's like the genie was out of the bottle. So, and if you look at other places in the world, like Sydney, Australia, very similar as well. Once they got the Olympics, house prices went up as well. So just a fantastic marketing platform, right? Because you're beamed around to half a billion homes across the planet. Okay, Tim, let's jump into today's topics. All right, I'm going to start. The first one comes from the front lines of real estate. A client of mine made an offer. We made an offer on a townhouse in Burnaby. Now, this was an older, big time fixer upper. There were 21 offers on this townhouse. We were one of the 21. And, I was working the phones aggressively like a journalist at the New York Times, trying to find out what it would take to get it done for our clients. Um, in the end, it turns out they went with a subject-free offer or an unconditional offer, or sometimes people call it a cash offer. Basically, no strings attached. 3 days later, because there's the 3-day rescission period here in British Columbia, so the buyer of a subject-free offer can still back out for 3 days. They didn't. They moved forward. I called the listing agent to find out what the final number was. Turns out our client made an offer that was $50,000 higher than the unconditional offer. We had only 2 conditions: financing and inspection. And we trimmed those conditions from 5 down to 24 hours. The seller wouldn't wait 24 hours for more than $50,000. Tim, would you wait 24 hours for $50,000?
I mean, can I wait 48 hours for 100,000? Is this a linear question? I would certainly wait 24 hours for $50,000 unless I didn't want there to be an inspection that might uncover something that could give the buyer some leverage and lose me more than that 50,000. So I mean, I don't think the seller would care about the 1 day for financing. That doesn't really impact them. But to me, this sounds like they don't want the inspection. They won't wait a day for an inspection and $50,000. To me, it sounds like they don't want an inspection for some reason. And was this at all a red flag for you when you heard this, or what's your take on why they wouldn't do it?
You know what? I had talked to the listing agent the day of and the day before, and he'd reiterated the position that the seller was out of the country. They knew that the home was in a very poor state. It was an estate sale, and when you have an estate sale, sometimes it's just, it's like granny's been living there, or grandpa, and it's just everything needs to be renovated, right? And he just reiterated that they wanted a clean offer. They wanted a subject-free offer. And I understand that. And generally speaking, there is some savings when you make an unconditional offer, because, if there's a gap of $10,000, maybe even $20,000, as a seller, you might say, hey, I get 750 today versus 765 2 weeks from now. I'll slam dunk the 750 today. Makes sense. I was just surprised by the gap. The gap was quite large. And the amount of time needed was small. I presume it was simply them wanting to get the money right away. And if I've noticed one thing, it's in estate sales, that's when sellers are not greedy. It's the kids or the grandkids selling it on behalf of the deceased, and they're not concerned with squeezing every drop out of the lemon.
So, okay, I mean, I understand what you're saying about them wanting the money right away, but let's be clear, they don't get the money right away in either scenario. There was still a closing date, and I imagine your closing date was probably similar to the closing date of the offer that won, was it?
I don't know the offer's closing date, but it would be, yes.
It would be similar. So they would be getting the money at the same point. So ultimately they're getting the money at the same point on the same time. So to me, it seems like they really don't want an inspection. I don't see any other reason why they wouldn't wait a day and end up with $50,000 more on the same and in the same time frame. So to me, it just sounds like they really don't want an inspection for whatever reason. And maybe it's if everyone knew it was in bad condition because it's an estate sale, they should, an inspection wouldn't change that. So I wonder, I'm very curious what turns up in that place, and would love to talk to the buyers and hear about it. But I would wager that there's a reason they didn't want an inspection. To me, that's all it sounds like, because at the end of the day, they get the money at the same time, closes at the same time. There's just, even they're out of the country, they don't have to do anything. I mean, they have to sign one more form to remove subjects. That's it. That's all that's required on their end is one more signature. So I have a hard time buying anything other than they didn't want an inspection for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think you're right. It must have been that they wanted the money. They wanted to make the close the deal that night.
Yeah.
And they didn't even want to wait until the next morning. So who knows?
Yeah.
Let's move now. By the way, just to answer the question I asked you, I would definitely have waited. And what I would have advised my clients, if I were in the listing agent's shoes, I would have said, look, let's take the higher offer and put the other guys into a backup offer position. We take one of the two. It's a no-brainer.
No, that's, I mean, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Next topic that I want to discuss with you. For first-time buyers, federal government announced some changes. They are two big changes. Do you want to tell us what they are and what impact are they going to have?
Certainly. So the I sent you a note about this when they announced them. So we're recording on Sunday, April 14th here, and I believe they were announced, was it Thursday or Friday of last week? I think it was Thursday. Um, and so I sent you, and we chatted briefly about them then, and it's good because I've had some time to think about it and kind of wrap my head around how I think this is going to impact. So the first change is they're going to allow 30-year amortizations on insured properties for first-time home buyers for new builds. So for someone who may not be familiar, an insured mortgage is if you put down less than 20%, you need to get what's called mortgage default insurance. This is offered by three providers in Canada. Typically, most people associate it with CMHC, but there's also Sagen and Canada Guarantee. And if you put less than 20%, you need this mortgage default insurance. And there's three main criteria to qualify for mortgage insurance. The first is the purchase price has to be under $1 million. The second is the maximum amortization is 25 years. And the third is the revolving around debt service ratios. So how much the mortgage can go towards your payment. And that's 39% of the mortgage and 44% of overall debt. But that's neither here nor there for this question. So the change that was made is they extended that amortization to 30 years for first-time home buyers for new builds. So that will allow, when you extend the amortization, it lowers the monthly payment. And by lowering the monthly payment, you make the amount, it does two things. It increases cash flow, all else things being the same, because you're paying less per month, but it also allows an individual or couple to qualify for more because the monthly payment is lower, so they can qualify for a larger overall mortgage. So by increasing it out to 30 years, it essentially makes more people able to qualify for new builds. And I think this will have an impact, but I think it's going to be small. Do you want to jump in?
No, keep
Oh, sorry.
going.
I thought I saw your hand there. But where I think the real caveat is on the $1 million, because I'm not sure how many new builds there are. I mean, certainly we're in the lower mainland Vancouver market, and things are way too expensive here. Other parts, more rural parts of Canada, there's lots you can get for under $1 million. But new builds around here for under $1 million they're not that plentiful. But overall, I think this will, I mean, it might slightly increase the prices because it makes things easier to qualify for, so that, can impact the demand side.
So the big change here, obviously, is it reduces your monthly payment. Like an example I had here was if you were buying a $750,000 condo that's a new build,
Yeah.
you're putting down 75K, 10%. You're going to pay $300 less per month because you can amortize this sucker for 30 years instead of 25, which is, I guess that would be huge for a lot of buyers, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I think really where it comes in is the qualification piece as well. Because if someone can qualify for a 25-year amortization, this just helps their cash flow. But if someone can't qualify the 25-year for something, and now it allows them to qualify at 30 years, that increases the demand for these, because there's now more people who can qualify. So the demand goes up.
Sure.
So if demand goes up and supply stays the same, price goes up, right? Supply and demand. So that's one slight concern, is maybe this drives prices up, but I think it'll be marginal just because it's only for new builds. And the other thing I'm hoping is I'm really hoping this incentivizes builders to build more, is because this was lobbied for by the Canadian Home Builders Association, I believe. So if you look at the statistics put out by CMHC, we're way behind on the number of units that we need to be building to sustain the number of people in our country. So I hope this allows us to, or incentivizes builders to build more, knowing that there'll be more demand. So that's why I am in favor of this, because I hope it incentivizes builders to build more. I don't think I think the like overall effect of it will be kind of in the margins. But yeah, that's my
Well,
take on it.
let me ask you, as a
Mhm.
follow-up, what's the second biggest big change here on the RSP that they've made?
So the home buyers plan is the plan or the program where you're allowed, if you're a first-time home buyer, to withdraw money from your RRSPs tax-free and contribute it to the purchase of a first home. So previously, the limit was $35,000. You could take $35,000 out of your RRSP to contribute to the purchase of a home. Now they've increased it to $50,000, and they've also increased the amount of time that you have to pay it back from 2 years to 5 years. Sorry, the time that you have to start paying it back from 2 years to 5 years. Because so that you still have to pay it back over 15 years, but you have 3 years longer to start paying it back.
I
So
guess
yeah.
and Tim, I guess the big thing here is that you can now take out a lot more money out of your RRSP, and you're not taxed on this as long as you're using it towards the down payment of your home, right?
Mostly correct. It doesn't actually have to be towards the down payment. There you can, as long as you're buying your first home, most people put it towards the down payment, but you can also use it towards buying furniture, stuff like that for your first home.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And if a couple of questions here for you. How many, let's say, of the people that knock on your door looking for a mortgage, what percentage of them do not have a 20% down payment and are getting what are called insured mortgages? And it's just
Mm,
maybe a ballpark.
I would say half ish.
Okay.
And now that's not a great approximation for the overall market, because my demographic is largely who I work with. So younger individuals, and younger individuals have less savings. And a lot of my clients are first time home buyers. So, and a lot of them don't have tons of savings. So that's why I see probably more insured mortgages than other people might.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Look, and when we're talking on this topic, I wanted to sort of transition to one bedrooms that are going for $800,000 plus. And the reason why is I'm working with a client right now. We've successfully found another place. She's got a home, but we were looking at one point in time in the Lower Lonsdale area, North Van, beautiful area. It's got everything, easy to get to the city by jumping on the ferry and so on. And one of the things I've noticed, whether it's Lower Lonsdale or on this side in Vancouver, if it's a one bedroom priced over $800,000, it sits. It doesn't move. And we were in a negotiation here where we were trying to pull the seller off their price. They'd already been on the market, I think, about 6 months, going back to last Halloween. And I think we were trying to pull them down, not by much money, really. It may have been $10,000, $15,000, if that. And they just wouldn't budge. And I just remember thinking, well, this is bizarre. You've been on the market this amount of time. And I'm thinking, what is the opportunity cost to sellers like that are just sitting on the market? I don't know if you have some thoughts on that.
So do you think the market is going up or going down?
For one bedroom, $800,000 units?
Yeah, or I would say just yes, and in general.
In general, time is always on the seller's side because over a year, over several years, the market will go up, right? Generally speaking, it'll be higher a year from now than it is today. And sort of if you look out 4 or 5 years, it's about 95, 99% of the time it's higher than it is today. However, right now, I would say it's not going up for an $800,000 one bedroom. Now, that's a premium unit. I mean, we're talking about, concrete construction, no older than 10, 15 years, air conditioning. Maybe there's an EV charger there too. It's a premium unit. And but it just seems hard for people to qualify for those. Because I think if you're putting down $160,000, 20%, you still have to come up with the other $640,000 from the bank.
Yeah.
And plus your maintenance fees, your insurance, your taxes. That's a lot of money for one person to carry on their shoulders.
So yeah, absolutely. And for a one bedroom. And so it sounds like your client here was an individual.
Correct.
So we briefly chatted about this, so I did come prepared on this. So just so it's not like I'm doing these numbers off the top of my head, but I wanted to just try and paint the picture of how difficult this could be for somebody to afford and to qualify for. So if let's just start by looking at an insured mortgage, let's say 10%, because saving is hard. So $80,000 is a lot of money to save. So let's just say somebody was able to save $80,000. They have no debts, no car payments, nothing like that. Let's assume taxes are $2,500 a year. Condo fees are $400 a month, and $50 for heat. Those are all things we have to factor in when we're qualifying for a mortgage. So if we use a rate of 5%, can you guess what income they would need on an annual basis to qualify?
Yeah, but I got to do the math in my head. So give me a couple of seconds here with this. I'm gonna guess that they need at least $150,000 a year.
$174,000 a year is what would be required to qualify for that mortgage. So and I think what you might have missed is you have to also include the CMHC mortgage insurance on top of the mortgage. So yeah, I think if you do that, you're right there. But so $174,000 is the income required for an individual with $80,000 saved to buy something for 800,000. I don't know many people, that make $175,000. And I looked up the numbers on this too. And the top 2% of income in Canada is 190,000. Top 5% is 132,000. So, that's pretty tough. Now, if we look at someone who could put, say, 20% down, and since they can put 20% down, we can now use a 30-year amortization, like we chatted about earlier, that increases the affordability. I'll keep everything the same. I'll keep the rate the same as well, although for uninsured mortgages, the rate is typically a little bit higher, but just to kind of try and keep it as similar as possible. The income required on that is 127,000. So, which is still not the top 5% in Canada is 132,000. So you're not far off. It's probably top 6% income earners in Canada who've also managed to save $160,000 and also have no other debts. So to me, that's a pretty rare scenario, especially when we consider that if it's an individual, they're probably younger if they don't have a partner yet or something like that. It's harder to save money, I believe, as an individual than it is as a couple. So I think, chances of an individual qualifying for a one bedroom at 800,000, I think to me, that's why that number of 800,000 is such a hard one to get past. And just, running those numbers, it's pretty tough to, $175,000 a year in income. And yeah, also 800. Go ahead.
I agree with you, and that is one of the things when I do a market evaluation for sellers who have a premium, classy one bedroom in a newer building like this, and if they're expecting over 800,000, I said, look, you're gonna be expecting for quite some time. It's gonna take this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. Because for the same reasons, like you're saying, you're basically looking for a buyer who's in the top 1%.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of them out there, right?
Now,
what I wanted to do is, sorry, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, and I was just going to say the other thing is, one bedrooms are tough to who's going to live in a one bedroom, typically a single person or a young couple. And so a lot of times I know investors like one bedrooms as well, because they can rent them out, but you'd have to rent this for so much more as well to kind of recoup the cost. So it's tough to see the the market for a one bedroom at that price, like you're saying, is a very small niche market of people who kind of fit the bill that would be interested in buying something like that, I think.
Would you pay 800,000 for a one bedroom?
Absolutely not. Never.
Why?
Why?
Too too expensive.
Wait, it's too much money for not enough house.
Yeah.
I mean, I would take a train 30 minutes and, get something for, you know, 3/4 of that price, or, buy a house somewhere, a couple hours away and you get a whole house. So
A
yeah,
couple hours, yeah. But
yeah,
I'll come back to you when gas prices are at $2 a liter. Let's
uh,
see how you feel about that.
they're there. I paid 209 yesterday.
Sorry, I meant $3 a liter.
$3 a liter. Okay. I was like, Christian, yeah, we're already there.
Tim, I wanted to move on.
Yeah.
Let's go to the Bank of Canada. They came out, they held steady this week again. And a lot of talk in the news media that they were going to come down. And now I thought this is crazy talk. Like inflation clearly hasn't been wrestled to 2%. And if you read these Bank of Canada statements, anybody can do this. They are right there on the Bank of Canada website.
Mhm,
And I don't know why you wouldn't take them at their word, right?
mhm.
It's a government. They're the Bank of Canada. So they're going to try and wrestle inflation down. They haven't, and they have said that until they're not able to, interest rates are going to stay where they are. So I wasn't expecting any change. What about your crystal ball here? Let's get it out. What are your expectations on inflation
Yeah,
and interest rates?
and interest rates. Yeah. So my crystal ball's in the shop. Unfortunately, it's not functioning very well at the moment. So I'll just give you some opinions. And first of all, it's really interesting. Something I hear a lot from clients and people that I talk to about rates is, oh, they say they're coming down. They say they're going up. Well, first of all, who is they? And I'm a big sports fan. I other than soccer, as we talked about in the beginning, I follow the NFL. It's probably the one I follow the most. And to me, interest rates in Canada are covered almost like a sport. There's people on both sides. There's speculation. The reporters are and they always need something to talk about. The Bank of Canada decides these rates 8 times a year. So, and the interim is filled with speculation on what's going to happen at the next one. So that's I'll just kind of start there. And the other thing, so when people say they think they were coming down, what does happen, what does happen is there is speculation. People speculate on where rates are going to go, and they speculate with their dollars, because people hedge their trades. I don't understand this all completely, but there's a swap you can do to kind of hedge some other trades, and this essentially is a forward-looking indicator of where the market thinks that interest rates are going to go. So at the beginning of this year, November, December of last year, it's called the OIS indicator, was pricing in about what was it? It was about 150 basis points, so 1.5% of rate cuts this year. Now that indicator is down to 75 basis points, or 0.75%, for this year. So I think when people say the rates are coming down, what people are actually looking at is they're looking at this OIS marker of where the market is pricing it. And the market's not right. It's just what, people with a lot of money, all the liquidity, where that's kind of trending. So I think that's the first thing to keep in mind. Now, as far as what I think is going to happen, there's a couple things. I can make cases for both sides. I can make a case for you on why we should cut, and I can make a case for you on why we should hold. And so I think the case on why we should cut rates is our GDP is weak. Our GDP has been growing, but we've had a lot of people and brought a lot of people into the country. So our GDP per capita, with gross domestic product per capita, is declining. So I think it's 6 straight quarters of decline. And so that's not an indication of a strong economy. The other reason to cut would be that mortgage interest costs make up a large percentage of the inflation. So if you strip out mortgage interest costs from the inflation, it's under 2%. So, and mortgage interest costs are a factor of where interest rates are. So that's kind of, you know, chasing your tail in a circle a little bit, right? So those are some of the reasons, and also the economy itself. I think a lot of people feel it is not doing great. Our jobs numbers are not super high, because that's the other thing they look at is where unemployment is. So our unemployment is increasing. So that's another reason that you could look to see a cut. What I'm really concerned about, or why I think not cutting makes some sense, or the case to not cut, I'll call it, is that the US economy is really strong. They're currently talking about the next move in the US could be a hike. You know, I think Larry Summers recently came out with something that said, you know, the next move could be a hike. So it certainly doesn't make sense for them to cut at the moment. Their economy is running quite hot. Their inflation that came out last week was higher than expected, I think, for the third time in a row. So if their inflation is increasing, they're certainly not going to cut. If they hike, that's bad. And we kind of need to follow suit with them. Otherwise, our Canadian dollar will just get destroyed. So I think the Fed is playing a bit, or sorry, not the Fed, the Bank of Canada is playing a bit of a tug of war of, if we cut, then the dollar gets hammered. And if we don't cut, you know, that's a tough situation as well. So, but to your point on the inflation, inflation has started creeping down. The 2%, I definitely don't think we'll see a cut before it comes under 2%. Even including the mortgage interest costs, that's always been factored in there. So my crystal ball, if you will, my thought is that the consensus right now is that we'll see a cut in June or July in the summer. I think we could. I think it could get pushed out a bit later to September. Right now, if we're setting the over under at 0.75% in cuts for the year, I would take the under, personally. And also, like I said, it's Sunday, April 14th, and I think there's a lot of uncertainty this weekend with what's happening overseas in the Middle East. And, you know, wars are inflationary. So if, depending on what happens there, you know, I'm really worried about what the bond market's going to look like tomorrow, because bonds drive fixed interest rate pricing, which we can chat about another day. But if the bonds skyrocket tomorrow, and that's another not good sign. So I'm taking the under on 75 basis point or 0.75% cut this year. But that's kind of my overall thesis on it, if you will.
Well said, Tim. There's a lot there. I don't know that we have all the time to unpack it all, but you did mention Larry Summers. Larry Summers is one of the few people that I would read about or listen to if you're really trying to understand where inflation might be going, and how the U.S. Fed responds to it. He's incredibly intelligent, well-spoken, and you don't have to have a background in economics to understand him. That's what makes him. True experts always have this gift of being able to explain things that a 5-year-old child would understand. And Larry Summers is excellent.
Even something like inflation.
What's that?
Even something like inflation, he can explain. That's a hard one, and he does it.
He can.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
can. You know, when I come, and we talked about this in a previous episode, but when I broke my mortgage and took another mortgage, the reason I did that was I'd read enough of what he was saying, and I said, okay, this just makes sense. I have to listen to this.
Mm-hmm.
I had a client ask me a question along these lines, and just quick check here, Tim. How much time do we have right now?
About 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Okay, this should be good. Maybe if you can answer it in 3, and then we'll sign off for the last one. This gentleman sent me an email. He's looking for a home on the west side. I don't want to get into too many details, but I can share. He writes, variable rates seem to be the logical thing to choose currently, but I guess up to 6.5% doesn't give too much confidence when you're looking at a 7-figure loan. Question for you on that. What's your take on that and variable rates?
Well, that's a tough one to do in 2 minutes, but I personally I lean fixed. I think it depends on your demeanor. I'm more of a like conservative, like especially first time home buyer. I don't think variable is a good idea. Fix, what you're getting. But the point about, if we're at the top of the rate cycle, there's one direction for them to go, and that's down. It just has to cover the difference between, so if he's saying 6.5 and say he could get a 5-year fixed at 5% or a 3-year fixed at 5.3%, they have to come down more than 1.2%, and they have to come down fast enough to make the savings worth it. So I see the argument for a variable, and I understand it.
Tim, to
Mhm.
interrupt you here, the argument for a variable is that it's going to come down, and it's going to come down so sufficiently that you would make up for the high point that you started out with today.
Correct. And also to add in there, the penalty to break a variable is only 3 months interest. So there's more flexibility there. So yeah, you could come down, and if you are thinking you might move, there's also an argument for a variable there, because if you're not going to hold on to this place forever, it gives you a cheaper out if rates do come down than a fixed mortgage. So there are arguments. There's use cases for it. And I think the big one is just looking at it, whether you think rates are coming down next meeting or later this year. I think most people think for Canada, we're not going up. Like the next move is downwards. So that kind of inevitably means rates go down and we're at the top. So that, when you don't want to take a variable, certainly is at the bottom when rates are only going to go up. Right now would be, so if we're at the top, there's sense to be made there. And I have a model that I run that kind of takes some assumptions, and then, we can say, okay, how much do you think it's coming down by? And that's kind of how I look at it. But it's a very nuanced conversation, and it's individual dependent, I'll say.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, so we're going to sign off there. To everybody joining us, thanks for joining us, and expect to see us again here on YouTube and other parts, also the podcast. Join us again. We look forward to speaking with you and sharing some war stories from the front lines of the housing market. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Thanks, everybody.